Hello and welcome to the Intentional Brief, your weekly video update on the one big thing in cybersecurity news for growth stage companies, their investors, and management teams. I'm your host, Shay Colson, managing partner at Intentional Cybersecurity, and you can find us online at intentionalcyber.com. Today is Monday, September 23rd, 2024, and there's been a lot of news and discussion in the past week that's kind of cyber adjacent, including some exploding pagers and handheld radios. And while there's some good and necessary discussion on those topics, they're not particularly relevant for this audience. Instead, I want to talk about something we've talked about before, which is software quality and how the lack of that quality in both software and hardware should or could drive our security programs. So in keeping with their theme of being very, very busy, the U.S. Department of Justice last week announced a court-authorized operation by the FBI to disrupt a worldwide botnet used by the People's Republic of China in what they called state-sponsored hackers. The announcement notes that, quote, the Justice Department today announced a court-authorized law enforcement operation that disrupted a botnet consisting of more than 200,000 consumer devices in the U.S. and worldwide. As described in court documents, the botnet devices were infected by the PRC's state-sponsored hackers working for Integrity Technology Group, a company based in Beijing and known to the private sector as Flax Typhoon. Now, why is this important to us? I think other than the obvious, which is that our companies may have been the targets of some of this espionage, or that the technology used by our companies may have unwittingly participated in this botnet, the larger picture comes from how these attacks were carried out. I think they leverage two key elements which are relevant to us. First, they use existing infrastructure to disguise malicious traffic as legitimate, and two, they leverage what Politico called an astounding array of vulnerabilities, noting that there were about 24 different exploits targeting various IoT and router devices used to carry out these attacks. So combined, these attacks and these TTPs, tactics, techniques, and procedures, are known as living off the land techniques, and they make it very hard to detect and defend against this type of activity. At the same time last week, and likely not entirely coincidentally, in a keynote address at Mandiant, now a Google company's keynote event, CISA Director Jen Easterly characterized the core problem in cybersecurity as one of technology vendors, who are the characters building problems into their products, which then open the doors for villains to attack their victims, she said. She went on to say that calling security holes software vulnerabilities, quote unquote, is too lenient, and the phrase really diffuses responsibility, she said. We should call them product defects. She also noted that instead of automatically blaming victims for failing to patch their products quickly enough, quote, why don't we ask, why does software require so many urgent patches? The truth is, we need to demand more of technology vendors, unquote. But for those of us here in this SME space or lower middle market space, are we really going to be able to pull kind of the economic levers of scale that the US government or Google can do? No, and frankly, we don't have the bandwidth to do that. But we do need to be aware of these risks, and I think managing them within our own infrastructures is important. But it's hard because these threats are ever evolving, and we don't have the capacity or the capability to do the type of deep analysis on these pieces of hardware and software that would uncover these vulnerabilities, much less fix them on our own. So instead, I think our strategy needs to be one that is rooted at the core of traditional information security theory, and that is diversity of defense and defense in depth. We need to pair these two concepts, of not having single points of failure, of not relying on a single given security control or security technology to provide protection for us, in combination with a deep knowledge of our own businesses to build resilient operations where activity beyond the baseline can be detected, investigated, and then hopefully remediated if it's malicious before it becomes a larger issue. While I think for a lot of us this may seem like a reach, or some of us even like a pipe dream, I think it's an effort that does ultimately deliver real business value in this sort of self-reflection and program development. This is the work that transforms cybersecurity efforts from playing defense into playing offense, and I think building programs that are thoughtful, that cover the basics well, that are both defensible and demonstrable, really truly help support and drive business growth and can increase valuation at the next transaction. I think this sort of ability to define these programs and then even accept defined risks knowingly and then demonstrate and communicate those to interested parties internally or externally is really what we should be striving for at our level of the game. We can let CISA and Google and the Googles of the world fight against the PRC and the Chinese hackers. I think our job is rather to fight complacency and to do so in a way that gives us a fighting chance in this uphill battle of cybersecurity. From a fundraising perspective this week, another solid week, I would say, not blockbuster, but good, with more than $13 billion in newly committed capital, led by a couple of large raises, including Kohlberg & Company's $4.3 billion for their 10th mid-market PE fund, Silverpoint Capital's $4.6 billion in their latest opportunistic private credit fund, and ICG's $1.9 billion for their third North American private credit fund. Couple all of that with the Fed's rate cut larger than anticipated, and we may see quite an active Q4 despite election concerns, or not. I can't see the future, but I do think these seem like good signs as we come to a close for the quarter. With that, a reminder, you can find all the links to the articles we talked about in the comment section below. You can find written transcripts and back issues of these videos at intentionalcyber.com, and we will see you next week for another edition of the Intentional Brief.